How did these highly anticipated films go from blockbuster dreams to box office nightmares? Imagine spending hundreds of millions on a movie, only to watch it crash and burn in front of the world. These are the biggest cinematic failures year by year, films that defied expectations, and not in a good way. Stick with us as we explore the first half of the biggest cinematic disappointments, with part 2 coming up soon. Trust me, you won't want to miss how these stories unfold. 1970, Darling Lily, office flop. 1971, The $1 Million Duck. What happens when Disney's family-friendly charm goes wrong? In 1971, The $1 Million Duck tried to capitalize on quirky humor and animal antics, but it flopped. With a $5 million budget, it only earned $6.5 million worldwide. The film, about a duck that lays golden eggs, failed to connect with audiences. Despite its seemingly whimsical premise, it was labeled as too silly and forgettable. Even with Disney's name attached, The $1 Million Duck proved that not every animal-based comedy was destined for success. 1972, Pope Joan. A historical epic about a female pope sounded daring, but in 1972, Pope Joan failed to make an impact. With a budget of $14 million, the film grossed just $2.5 million. The story, which focused on a woman disguised as a man in medieval times, was too controversial and poorly executed for audiences. Despite having a strong cast and historical intrigue, it lacked the proper pacing and dramatic depth to sustain interest. Pope Joan flopped, leaving its bold premise buried in cinematic history. 1973, Lost Horizon. What went wrong with Lost Horizon in 1973? Based on James Hilton's novel, this musical adaptation had high hopes, but ended up one of the biggest flops of the decade. With a $22 million budget, it grossed only $4 million. The film's strange blend of utopian ideals and over-the-top musical numbers didn't resonate with viewers. Despite a talented cast and grand set designs, its slow pacing and lackluster storytelling led to audience disengagement. Lost Horizon is now remembered as a cautionary tale for overambitious movie musicals. 1974, Daisy Miller. When Henry James's novel was adapted for the screen in 1974, it should have been a smash hit. Instead, Daisy Miller became a major box office disaster. Starring Sybil Shepherd, the film had a budget of $4 million but made only $3 million. The film's treatment of American versus European cultures felt outdated, and critics found it difficult to engage with the characters' complexities. Despite its literary roots, Daisy Miller failed to capture the hearts of mainstream audiences, leading to its quick fade into obscurity. 1975, The Lucky Lady. The phrase all-star cast usually brings excitement, but in 1975, The Lucky Lady proved otherwise. Starring Gene Hackman, Liza Minnelli, and Burt Reynolds, this lavish comedy about bootleggers during Prohibition was a critical and commercial failure. With a $20 million budget, it grossed just $8 million. The film was expected to be a major hit, but its weak script and lackluster performances left audiences unimpressed. The Lucky Lady is a prime example of how star power alone isn't enough to save a film from disaster. 1976, At the Earth's Core. At the Earth's Core, released in 1976, was a science fiction adventure that promised thrills and fantasy, but delivered little. Starring Peter Cushing, the film had a budget of $6 million, but grossed only $6.5 million, just scraping by. With its low-budget sets, cheesy dialogue, and underwhelming special effects, it failed to captivate audiences. The film's attempt to mix prehistoric creatures with futuristic technology fell flat, making it a forgettable entry in the genre. Even die-hard sci-fi fans struggled to find enjoyment in this underwhelming attempt. 1977, Sorcerer. Sorcerer is a tale of high expectations and a catastrophic crash. Released in 1977, this action thriller directed by William Friedkin had a budget of $22 million, but earned only $9 million. A remake of the 1953 French film The Wages of Fear, it had a compelling plot about 4 men transporting dangerous explosives through a South American jungle. Despite strong direction and cinematography, Sorcerer failed to find an audience due to its slow pacing and grim tone. A critical misstep that marked a turning point in Friedkin's career. 1978, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. What happens when you take a legendary Beatles album and turn it into a musical? In 1978, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band turned out to be one of the biggest box office bombs of the year. With a budget of $20 million, it grossed just $5 million. Despite its star-studded cast, including Peter Frampton and the Bee Gees, the film was blasted for its poor narrative and lack of emotional depth. The adaptation failed to capture the magic of the original music, leaving audiences confused and disappointed. 1979-1941. Steven Spielberg's 1941 was meant to be a high-energy, comedic war film, but it ended up being a costly misfire in 1979. With a budget of $35 million, it earned only $92 million worldwide. Despite Spielberg's proven track record, 1941 lacked the charm and pacing needed to make the action comedy genre work. The film's chaotic plot and over-the-top performances alienated audiences. What was intended to be a wild, comedic adventure about a Japanese attack on California turned into an expensive and forgettable failure. 1980, Raise the Titanic. A grand, high-budget disaster, Raise the Titanic, was released in 1980 with a budget of $40 million. The film, which aimed to bring the legendary ship back to life through a huge salvage operation, grossed only $7 million in the US. The plot was weak, and the special effects didn't live up to the expectations of an epic adventure. Despite boasting the allure of one of history's most famous ships, the film was a critical and financial failure. Its overly ambitious premise and lack of engaging story left audiences disinterested, making Raise the Titanic a sinking ship at the box office. 1981, Heaven's Gate. Heaven's Gate, released in 1981, is infamous for being one of the biggest financial disasters in Hollywood history. With a budget of around $44 million, the film grossed only $3.5 million worldwide. Directed by Michael Cimino, it was meant to be a grand historical epic about the Johnson County War, but became a chaotic production. The overblown set pieces, excessive violence, and troubled production process contributed to its downfall. Critics panned it for its lack of coherence, and the film's massive failure marked the end of Cimino's career and forever cemented Heaven's Gate as the poster child for Hollywood excess. 1982, Blade Runner. While Blade Runner, released in 1982, is now considered a science fiction masterpiece, it was a commercial bomb upon release. With a $28 million budget, it only grossed $27 million at the box office. Ridley Scott's dystopian vision, while visionary and revolutionary, was too ahead of its time for many viewers. The film's dark, complex narrative and its slow pace alienated mainstream audiences. Critics were divided, and the lack of widespread appeal led to disappointing ticket sales. Blade Runner has since gained a cult following and is regarded as one of the greatest films ever made, but at the time, it was a flop. 1983, You're the Hunter from the Future. You're the Hunter from the Future, a low-budget sci-fi fantasy film released in 1983, failed to make an impact despite its wild premise. The film, with a modest $4 million budget, grossed only $2.5 million. Starring the muscular Reb Brown, the film blended prehistoric creatures with futuristic technology, but it quickly became a laughingstock for its campy plot and poor production quality. Critics mocked its cheesy effects, and audiences found it impossible to take seriously. Despite the combination of action, adventure, and sci-fi elements, You're became a classic example of low-budget failure. 1984, Dune. David Lynch's Dune, released in 1984, was a visually stunning adaptation of Frank Herbert's novel, but its $40 million budget only returned $30.9 million. The film's complex plot and intricate world-building were too much for many viewers to digest, and Lynch's interpretation was criticized for being too faithful to the source material while failing to capture the novel's spirit. Audiences were confused by the narrative, and the film's slower pace and unclear exposition failed to appeal to mainstream moviegoers. Despite its stunning visuals and ambitious scope, Dune flopped at the box office, although it later gained a cult following. 1985, Revolution. Revolution, released in 1985, aimed to tackle the American Revolution with an all-star cast that included Al Pacino. However, the film's heavy-handed approach and lackluster performances led to its financial demise. With a $28 million budget, Revolution earned only $6 million at the box office. Critics slammed the film for its disjointed narrative, which was supposed to highlight the emotional cost of war, but instead ended up feeling flat and boring. Despite its historical significance and the star power of Pacino, Revolution was a cinematic failure that failed to captivate audiences. 1986, Shanghai Surprise. Shanghai Surprise, released in 1986, is best remembered for being a critical and commercial failure despite its star-studded cast, including Madonna and Sean Penn. The film had a budget of $17 million but only grossed $3.9 million worldwide. Set in China, the film was a romantic comedy with a plot that failed to deliver any real charm or substance. Critics panned the weak dialogue, lack of chemistry between the leads, and uninspired direction. Shanghai Surprise is now infamous for being one of the most poorly received films of the decade, and its disastrous box office performance sealed its fate. 1987, Ishtar. Ishtar, released in 1987, is a legendary example of a Hollywood disaster. Starring Warren Beatty and Dustin Hoffman as two inept musicians in the desert, the film had an enormous $55 million budget but earned just $14 million. The comedy, directed by Elaine May, was poorly received for its lack of humor and uneven tone. The film's production troubles, budget overruns, and lack of effective marketing led to its demise. Critics hammered Ishtar for its weak script, and the film's disastrous box office run became the stuff of Hollywood legend, earning it the label of one of the biggest flops of the decade. 1988, Mac and Me. Mac and Me, released in 1988, was meant to capitalize on the success of E.T. the Extraterrestrial, but instead, it became one of the biggest box office bombs of the decade. With a $13 million budget, it earned only $6.4 million at the box office. The film, about a young boy and his alien friend, was criticized for its blatant product placement and lack of heart. The awkward, forced humor and cheesy special effects didn't resonate with audiences, and despite its attempt to tap into the same emotional themes as E.T., it failed miserably, eventually becoming a cult classic for all the wrong reasons. 1989, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. Terry Gilliam's The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, released in 1989, was an epic fantasy film that got lost in its own ambition. With a lavish budget of $46 million, the film only grossed $8 million. The film's over-the-top set designs, imaginative sequences, and star-studded cast couldn't save it from financial ruin. Audiences were baffled by its eccentric narrative and chaotic structure, leading to poor box office performance. While Munchausen has since been re-evaluated as a visual masterpiece, its failure at the box office cemented it as one of the biggest financial disappointments of the 1980s. 1990, The Bonfire of the Vanities. The Bonfire of the Vanities, based on Tom Wolfe's best-selling novel, seemed like a surefire hit with its all-star cast, including Tom Hanks, Bruce Willis, and Melanie Griffith. However, the film failed to resonate with audiences, grossing only $15 million against a $47 million budget. The story, a sharp critique of Wall Street excess, was deemed too satirical for mainstream audiences, while the film's tone felt disconnected from the original novel. Critics blasted it for failing to capture the novel's biting social commentary and for a narrative that felt both bloated and hollow. The Bonfire of the Vanities quickly became a cautionary tale of literary adaptations gone wrong. 1991, Hudson Hawk. Bruce Willis, typically associated with action-packed hits like Die Hard, delivered one of his biggest flops with Hudson Hawk in 1991. The film, an action comedy about a cat burglar who is forced to steal priceless art, had a $65 million budget but grossed just $17 million. Despite Willis's star power, the film's wacky tone, convoluted plot and over-the-top humor left audiences confused and disappointed. Critics panned the film for its lack of coherence and excessive quirkiness. What was meant to be a fun caper instead became a notorious failure, marking a major setback for both Willis and director Michael Lehmann. 1992, Newsies. Newsies, released in 1992, was a Disney musical inspired by the 1899 Newsboys' strike in New York City. Despite its upbeat music and strong performances, it bombed at the box office, earning only $3.5 million against a $15 million budget. The film was marketed as a family-friendly, feel-good musical, but lacked the charm and warmth necessary to resonate with its intended audience. Over time, Newsies gained a cult following, especially through its Broadway adaptation, but its initial theatrical run was a financial disaster, showing that not all Disney films can connect with audiences right away. 1993, Last Action Hero. Released in 1993, Last Action Hero was marketed as a genre-defying action comedy starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. The film's premise, about a boy who enters a fictional action movie world, was an innovative idea, but the execution left audiences perplexed. With an $85 million budget, it grossed only $50 million in the US. The film was caught in a strange middle ground between satire and traditional action, which confused viewers. Despite a strong performance by Schwarzenegger and some impressive action sequences, Last Action Hero failed to deliver the punch that fans were hoping for, leaving it in the dust as a commercial failure. 1994, It's Pat. It's Pat, released in 1994, was a film based on the popular Saturday Night Live character, played by Julia Sweeney, who is gender-neutral. The film had a budget of $25 million, but grossed only $60,000, making it one of the most infamous box office failures of the 90s. The humor, centered around Pat's gender ambiguity, was awkward and repetitive, and the film struggled to find the charm that worked in Sweeney's sketch comedy. While the character had a loyal following on SNL, the film's comedic premise did not translate well to the big screen. Audiences found it uncomfortable and unfunny, while critics pointed out the lack of depth and substance in the story. It's Pat quickly became a notorious flop, and its commercial failure marked the end of the character's cinematic career. It serves as an example of how certain characters don't always translate well outside of their original format. 1995, Cutthroat Island. Cutthroat Island, a swashbuckling pirate adventure, was released in 1995 with an ambitious $98 million budget, yet it grossed only $10 million worldwide, making it one of the biggest box office bombs of the decade. The film, starring Geena Davis as a pirate captain, was plagued by a muddled script, uneven performances, and a lack of coherent direction. Behind the scenes, there was significant turmoil, including director changes and production chaos, which only contributed to the film's downfall. The film's lavish set designs and action sequences could not make up for the lack of a compelling story. Despite Davis's strong performance and the attempts to revive the pirate genre, Cutthroat Island failed to resonate with audiences. The film's poor performance cemented it as a symbol of Hollywood's misguided attempts at revitalizing the pirate genre, and it ultimately became an iconic example of a failed blockbuster. 1996, The Island of Dr. Moreau. Released in 1996, The Island of Dr. Moreau was an adaptation of H.G. Wells' classic novel, starring Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer. Despite the star power, the film faced a disastrous production plagued by conflicts between the leads and behind-the-scenes chaos. With a budget of $40 million, the film grossed only $49 million globally. The troubled production, which saw director John Frankenheimer stepping in after the original director was fired, resulted in a film that lacked cohesion. The characters were underdeveloped, the plot convoluted, and the film's special effects were criticized as subpar for the time. Marlon Brando's eccentric performance and Val Kilmer's on-set behavior further complicated the movie's production, leaving it as one of the most infamous films in sci-fi cinema. The Island of Dr. Moreau became a cautionary tale in Hollywood about the dangers of unmanageable productions and creative differences. 1997, The Postman. Kevin Costner's The Postman, released in 1997, was an ambitious post-apocalyptic epic with a budget of $80 million. However, the film only earned $17 million at the box office, making it one of the most significant failures of the decade. Set in a dystopian future where the US government has collapsed, the film's overly long runtime, preachy tone, and lack of compelling characters alienated audiences. Critics found the story too slow and the characters uninspired, and despite Costner's popularity at the time, the film did not resonate with viewers. The film's failure was compounded by a weak reception from critics, with many calling it overly idealistic and drawn out. The Postman became a punchline in Hollywood for its box office failure, dampening Costner's reign in the late 90s and reinforcing the risks involved in creating a high-budget, epic-scale film that lacks both substance and direction. 1998, Sphere. Sphere, released in 1998, was based on Michael Crichton's best-selling novel and starred a star-studded cast, including Dustin Hoffman, Sharon Stone, and Samuel L. Jackson. Despite a strong premise, the film had a budget of $80 million, but only grossed $50 million worldwide. The movie attempted to blend sci-fi with psychological drama, but faltered due to slow pacing and a confusing plot. Critics and audiences alike were frustrated by the film's lack of clarity and the underdeveloped characters, which diminished its potential to be a captivating story. The special effects, while impressive for the time, couldn't save the film from its narrative shortcomings. Sphere's failure at the box office marked it as a missed opportunity in sci-fi cinema, where its intriguing premise could have been developed into something far more engaging. The film ultimately faded into obscurity, overshadowed by its stronger genre competitors. 1999, The Messenger, The Story of Joan of Arc. Released in 1999, The Messenger, The Story of Joan of Arc, directed by Luc Besson, was a historical epic that starred Milla Jovovich as the legendary French heroine. With a budget of $50 million, the film earned only $30 million globally. Despite the film's sweeping visuals and historical significance, critics were divided on the portrayal of Joan and the overall tone of the film. Jovovich's performance was criticized for lacking depth, and the serious treatment of Joan's story was mixed with melodrama, leaving the film feeling uneven. The film's slow pacing and lack of character development made it hard to connect with mainstream audiences. Although the film attempted to be a grand historical epic, it fell short of the emotional impact it aimed to achieve, earning The Messenger a spot in the Box Office Bomb Hall of Fame. It is now seen as a critical disappointment in the genre. And there you have it, our dive into the first half of Hollywood's biggest box office disasters from 1970 to 1999. These films were supposed to be monumental, but instead, they became cautionary tales of ambition gone wrong. But the story doesn't end here. Part 2 will reveal even more shocking failures that prove no film is safe from disaster, no matter how big the budget. Stay tuned, because you won't believe what happens next.